The Night of Truth. Once upon a time, in a king's court, there was a handsome, gracious knight. The king admired all his knights, but he admired this knight the most. This young knight was loyal and honest, and always speak the truth. The king appointed him to serve as the steward to the Knights of the Round Table. The knight was happy to serve his king, and he was deeply loyal and trustworthy. But as time passed, he began to distrust the queen. She was beautiful, of course, and many thought her a wonder, but the knight noticed her flirtations a tribute and considered her behavior unsuitable to be the wife of a king. He kept his feelings to himself, but as time passed, the queen learned of his disdain. Some say the other envious knights had informed the queen. Others say the queen noticed that on her own. At last she told her husband she wanted this knight to be expelled from the court. Naturally the king wished to please his wife, and the knight understood it was his duty to leave. With a heavy heart, he departed, traveling north to the river Usk. For 1 long year, he lived in solitude and became so poor that he no longer could care for himself. His anguish grew, and the villagers, rather than helping him, made fooling of him. So he left the riverside and wandered around the countryside, living on wild berries and growing more despondent and sorrowful as time passed. Then one day, in a forest, he came upon a mysterious castle, a place he had never seen before. The knight stared in wonder at its bounty and opulence. As he stared at the marvelous surroundings, the most beautiful woman he had ever seen approached. She was dressed in exquisite robes and a dozen fairies attended to her. "I am Triamor," she said. Triamor was a fairy maiden who possessed fortune and power beyond his imagination. Her beauty and her power were exceeded only by the bounty of her heart, and that heart fell in love with the poor, lost, honest knight. She did not see the poverty or sorrow of the ragged wretch before her. She only saw how good the man he was. He fell in love with her at the very first sight. Triamor took the knight to her castle, and when he was rested and restored, she gave him a servant, a horse, a suit of armor and sacks of gold. And she gave him her love. "There is just one promise you must make," she said. "No one must ever know of our love." "I promise," he said. "I will do anything you ask." Then Triamor gave him the gift of an enchantment so powerful, he could never be harmed. "No one can hurt you so long as you keep your promise," she said. The knight rode back to the court where people gazed in amazement at him. Now everyone wished to be his friend. In his honor they held a tournament, and he won every joust. People understood he was somehow blessed. But no one knew his secret. Although the knight often visited his beloved, riding deep into the forest, he was always careful no one followed him. He never spoke her beloved's name. And as time passed, their love grew deeper, and the knight name and fame spread. Eventually the news reached King. "Your favorite knight has become even more noble than he was," travelers told the king. Filled with curiosity, the king sent for him. This time, when the queen saw him, she did not despise him. Instead, she found him charming and delightful, and she called the knight to her private chambers. The knight could not disobey, so he reluctantly went. "You sent for me," he asked. The queen smiled her loveliest smile. "You have become so handsome. Surely you love your queen," she said flirtatiously. But despite her best efforts to convince the knight to love her, the knight remained unmoved. She instigated the knight until he lost his patience. "The plainest servant of my fairy woman, Triamore, is more beautiful than you," he said scornfully. "It is the heart that makes a woman beautiful and not the body." The queen exploded with rage and ran to tell her king that your favorite knight had tried to seduce her. When the king heard this, he arrested the knight and called him to the royal court for judgment. The knight's strength and power had left him, for he was no longer protected by the enchantment. He had broken his promise to Triamore. The judges of the royal court announced their verdict. "You have 2 weeks to find this fairy woman you speak of and bring her to court. If you do not return with her, you will be hanged for telling lies." Once again, the knight set off in search of his love. He searched everywhere, but all signs of her had vanished. A whole fortnight passed, but he had failed. Now he was not only poor, he was heartbroken. He rode back to court to meet his fate. In the courtroom, the king demanded the knight be hanged, but members of his court stalled. They did not want to kill such a good and honest man. "Let us send him into exile once again," they said. The king refused. He broke his promise to his king. "He is a traitor," King railed. The men continued to argue when, suddenly, the doors of the royal court flew open, and there, standing before all the men, was a woman of such transcendent beauty that took everyone's breath away. The knight looked down at the floor, fighting back tears, and did not see her at first. But when the room became suddenly silent, he looked up. "Triamore," he cried, and he rushed to her, and they embraced. "She is real," the king said, astonished at the queen's betrayal. "My favorite honest knight does not lie." He was set free, and the Knight of Truth left with Triamore to their land. There they lived happily ever after, and the queen's lie had forever left a mark on her king's noble kingdom. If you like the story, please do like, share and subscribe. Thank you for listening.